Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
I can tell you that they are heartbroken.
Hear from the attorney for Brian Laundries' family after remains are found near his notebook and backpack. And a re-sentence handed down for ex-police officer Mohamed Noor.
I hereby sentence you to the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 57 months.
Plus, R. Kelly placed on suicide watch as a date is set for his next federal trial. What's next for the disgraced R&B singer? And later, convicted wife killer Scott Peterson denied bail, but could be headed for another trial. Our legal analysts break down what's next.
Attorney and Jeanette.
You know, Jesse, the head of the FBI in Tampa is now calling Brian Laundrie a person of interest in Gabby Petito's murder. And I spoke with the Sarasota County medical examiner, Dr. Russell Vega. He told me that they are working on those remains, and he doesn't know how long it will take to identify them positively and to make that identification. Now, this comes as the attorney for the Laundrie family tells CNN the probability is strong that the remains are Brian Laundrie's, but the family is waiting for a forensic identification before saying anything more. Tuesday night, Steve Bertolino said he notified the FBI that Laundrie's parents wanted to search the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park the next morning. So they met there Wednesday morning, and that's when he said law enforcement found Brian Laundrie's backpack and his remains nearby, and Chris Laundrie found a dry bag belonging to Brian. The remains were found near the backpack, according to Bertolino, as I just mentioned. He spoke about all of this exclusively to CNN.
Is the area that they were searching when these discoveries were made, is this a new area that the parents hadn't informed authorities about before?
No, not at all. Indeed, this is the very area of the park that we initially informed law enforcement on, I believe it was September 17th, that Brian would be most likely in the preserve in this particular area, as I know it, near the bridge.
And Steve Bertolino said this was somewhat near the entrance to the Carlton Reserve, which has raised a lot of questions since the FBI and other law enforcement were there for, several weeks scouring this place. And Chris Laundrie actually went out there at one point in time and was on a gator with police pointing out areas of interest. The FBI said when making the announcement about the remains that the area had been underwater, as much of the rest of the park had been for a time as well. Law and Crime also spoke with forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan about what it takes to identify those remains.
I think that's certainly possible. Remember, we'll be able to do, not me, they will be able to do DNA sampling, potentially on the bone, or any other tissue that's left behind. It all depends on how intact the sample will be, and we've certainly got a parental sample. I would suspect that they've probably already done a buccal mucosal swab on the parents. At some point in time, I could have sworn I saw them going into the residence with DNA swab kits.
And they may also be using, Joseph Scott Morgan says, dental records to help make this identification as well. Again, Dr. Vega saying they don't know how long it will take to identify those remains. And when I asked him about the condition of the remains, he said that he couldn't say any more at this time. Jesse?
All right, thanks, Anjanette. We're joined now by co-host Terry Austin and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Nima, let's start with you. If these are his remains and they're in a position where we can determine the cause of death and the time of death, how is that going to affect the investigation moving forward?
Well, the investigation into Laundrie will be done. You can't prosecute a dead person. They'll determine if anyone else was involved with Gabby's murder, and if not, that's going to close the case. I mean, really, there may be a civil lawsuit against his estate. That's something that Tito's parents will have to do. But on the criminal side, if it's Brian Laundrie and if it's confirmed, which we all believe, that he was solely involved in Gabby's murder, then that's going to be the end of it.
Well, Terry, here's the other part of it, right? Because at first, Brian Laundrie's parents were noticeably silent throughout the case, and now they were helping with the search for their son. They were there when the remains and items were found. Do you think that they could face any possible criminal charges?
It is very possible, Jesse, that the parents could face charges. They could face charges of accessory after the fact. For that, all you need to show is that a crime was committed, there was knowledge of that crime, and they helped the individual to avoid arrest. And if that's the case, they could also be charged with obstruction of justice, which is also fairly straightforward. You just need an act that impedes the administration of justice. Now, you absolutely need to show that something happened, and you just look at the timeline and you can see the last time they heard from her, Gabby, was 8:30. And, you know, so basically we know that Brian was with his parents shortly after that. So I think that there was a conversation and they know more than they're saying.
And Jenna, real quick, what does Stephen Bertolino, the Laundrie family attorney, say about them not talking to the FBI, police, and the Petito family throughout the search?
Well, he told Chris Cuomo on CNN that he told them not to speak to any of those people. So he said, you know, basically that's on him. He advised them that they should not speak to law enforcement, that they should not speak to Gabby Petito's family. And, you know, Chris Cuomo followed up saying, well, you know, maybe that's the legally right thing to do, but how about morally? And he said he stands by the advice that he gave the Laundrie family.
Fascinating. All right. Thanks, Anjanette. Appreciate it. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, ex-cop Mohamed Noor addresses the court just minutes before he's resentenced.
Deeply grateful for Mr. Damon's forgiveness.
It was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight. The three men charged will now stand trial. For live
officer is resentenced to prison time just 1 month after the Supreme Court threw out his third-degree murder conviction. Mohamed Noor was convicted of the 2019 shooting death of Justine Ruszczyk, a 911 call reporting what she believed was a sexual assault. Noor, a responding officer to the call, said that he fired his gun because he feared for his partner's safety. He was convicted of third-degree murder, but last month's ruling vacated that conviction. On Thursday, a Minnesota judge sentenced Noor to 57 months in prison on his remaining second-degree manslaughter conviction. The judge also ruled that Noor will get credit for time served. During Thursday's hearing, the prosecution called Ruszczyk's death the perfect storm, as her former fiancé said that he forgives her shooter, and Noor pledged to make a change.
On July 15th, 2017, so many lives changed in a blink of an eye. 2 young officers, both early in their careers, both overreacted, and Mr. Noor's overreaction caused the tragic death of Miss Ruszczyk.
And I have no doubt she would have forgiven you, Mohamed, for your inability to manage your own emotions that night, which resulted in you pulling that trigger. Justine was and is still my greatest teacher. Given her example, I want you to know that I forgive you, Mohamed. All I ask is that you use this experience to do good for other people.
I'm deeply grateful for Mr. Damon's forgiveness. I'm deeply sorry for the pain that I've caused that family, and I will take his advice and be a unifier.
All right, so Nima, what's interesting is the reason that Derek Chauvin was charged and ultimately convicted of third-degree murder in the George Floyd case was because of Noor's third-degree murder conviction, which was valid at the time. So now that that charge was thrown out in Noor, could Chauvin's conviction on third-degree murder be thrown out?
Yeah, I expect it to be thrown out as well based on the same logic and legal reasoning, right? The Minnesota Supreme Court said that a third-degree murder charge can't be sustained when the officer or the defendant actions are directed at a specific individual. And obviously that's what happened with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin and Mohamed Noor. So I expect that conviction to be vacated with respect to just that count only, that third-degree murder charge, that depraved heart, but it's not going to affect Derek Chauvin's sentence because in that particular case, he was also convicted of second-degree murder, whereas Mohamed Noor was not.
Yeah, it might not help him too much practically. Terry, what are your thoughts about Noor's new sentence? It seems kind of pretty light, and do you think he'll be released soon now?
Well, I think the new sentence for the lesser charge of that second-degree manslaughter is fairly reasonable, although it does seem as though it's light. The sentencing guidelines call for 41 to 57 months, and neither the prosecution nor the defense asked for a departure from the guidelines. So the prosecution sought the maximum, defense sought the 41, and the judge said, I'm going to give you the 57. So I think it's reasonable, and he could get out basically after he has served at least 2/3 of that sentence.
Pretty incredible, and with time served, to think about getting out pretty soon after a woman's life was taken. It's the law, that's what it is. Over now to the West Coast, a California man is arrested and charged with his wife's murder 10 months after she went missing. On Tuesday, 40-year-old Larry Millete was charged with murder and possession of a semi-automatic rifle in connection to the death of his wife. 40-year-old May Millete, nicknamed Maya, went missing in January from her Chula Vista home. She and her husband had 3 young children. Early on, her husband said that he had nothing to do with the disappearance, and family said that they believed he wouldn't hurt her. But on Tuesday, the Chula Vista Police Department announced investigators spent thousands of hours reviewing the case, serving 67 search warrants, conducting 87 interviews, and reviewing hundreds of tips. The body of Maya Millete has not yet been recovered. Larry Millete is set to appear in court on Thursday. And coming up on Law and Crime Daily, could another trial be in the works for Scott Peterson? Our legal analyst explains what's next for the convicted murderer. But first, R. Kelly's plans for next summer are put on the calendar when the R&B singer will once again face a federal trial on child pornography charges. Stay with us. And welcome back, everybody. Another trial date is set for convicted R&B singer R. Kelly, as his attorneys say he was put on suicide watch in federal jail. On Wednesday, a judge set an August 2022 court date for Kelly's second federal trial stemming from child pornography charges, and that trial is set to be held in Chicago. Right now, though, Kelly is being held in a Brooklyn federal jail after last month's guilty verdict. A federal jury found Kelly guilty on 9 counts, including racketeering, kidnapping, sex trafficking, and violating the Mann Act. A federal judge ordered that Kelly remain in custody until his sentencing in May 2022. For that, he faces up to life in prison. Now, the estranged singer appeared in court virtually on Wednesday, where attorney Steve Greenberg said that Kelly was briefly placed on suicide watch following last month's federal conviction. He says Kelly showed no signs he was going to harm himself, and he has since been taken off watch. In the upcoming trial out of Chicago, Kelly faces federal charges for child pornography and obstruction of justice. All right, let's bring back in Terry Austin and Nima Rahmani. Okay, so Nima, now that Kelly's attorney out in Chicago says that he was placed on suicide watch after his federal conviction, it makes me wonder, is that something that we commonly see, maybe after such a widely publicized trial and guilty conviction?
Jesse, it's not uncommon. I can tell you that I've put more than 1,000 people in federal prison, and this is something that happens all the time, especially for someone like R. Kelly, who is likely going to die in federal prison. He's looking at a lengthy prison sentence in the Brooklyn case, and probably even more in the Chicago case. And there's cases out of Minnesota and Georgia as well. So there's a lot going on for R. Kelly here.
What about deja vu, Terry? Because R. Kelly was charged and acquitted of child pornography back in 2008. Do you think the same thing could happen here? Could he be acquitted?
I do not think he'll be acquitted this time. The evidence in New York was overwhelming, and I think the Chicago prosecution is probably taking notes at the strategy there. And these charges are very serious, the child pornography and the obstruction of justice, and they carry some very heavy penalties as well. And the other issue here is that main witness didn't testify in 2008. And I think we might get some witnesses who will testify this time around. And obviously, with the Me Too movement and Time's Up, I think people are going to convict him this time around. So he won't have that deja vu again.
And for anybody who thought, oh, he would never be convicted, he has this shield around him, obviously that is a very different case now than it was in 2008. And in other celebrity court news, very different, Britney Spears' father is dropped by his attorneys as the battle over her conservatorship rages on. Jamie Spears has now acquired a new legal team after his original representation said they fear his daughter will pursue a lawsuit if and when the conservatorship is terminated. This comes after the pop star's father was suspended as the conservator last month, marking a huge milestone in the so-called Free Britney movement. This decision comes after Britney Spears' attorney Matthew Rosengart stated that his firm looks to investigate potential financial mismanagement from Jamie Spears, in fact alleging that he profited off of his daughter's conservatorship. Jamie Spears has denied allegations of misconduct during his time as conservator, and Britney is due back in court on November 12th to address a possible termination of the conservatorship. Last month, both sides filed petitions to end the guardianship. And when we come back, Scott Peterson is back in the courtroom of the death of Ahmaud Arbery. The judge ruling on Thursday that spectators cannot wear items on their clothing that display political opinion. Father and son duo Gregory and Travis McMichael and their neighbor William Bryan face several charges, including malice murder and felony murder in connection with the death of Ahmaud Arbery. In February 2020, the father and son tailed 25-year-old Arbery in their pickup truck while he reportedly was out for a jog. Travis McMichael shot and killed him, claiming self-defense. The father and son plan to cite a citizen's arrest law, but that has since been repealed and replaced. Brian, the neighbor, followed along and captured the entire confrontation on his cell phone. On Thursday, Brian's attorney, Kevin Goff, requested that Arbery's family leave the courtroom, saying that Arbery's father and other members of the Transformative Justice Coalition were wearing lapel pins with logos that could possibly influence potential jurors. The pins had quotes from the late Representative John Lewis saying, quote, "Make good trouble." Some also wore pins from the Rainbow Coalition that read, "People united to save humanity." The judge will now ask anyone that enters the gallery to not display their particular opinion. Court is looking for 64 jurors to advance to the next round. And convicted wife killer Scott Peterson is denied bail as his defense team works to secure him a new trial. On Wednesday, a judge ruled that Peterson would stay behind bars until his resentencing hearing set for December. As Law&Crime Daily has reported, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence last year. All this comes years after Peterson was convicted of the murders of his wife Lacey Peterson and their unborn son Connor. Looking forward, Peterson's legal team is now working to secure their client a new trial based on allegations of juror misconduct from his 2004 trial. A California Superior Court judge is expected to make that ruling, and Peterson is due back in court on November 10th to discuss whether his appellate attorneys can continue to represent him now that his case is no longer involves the death penalty. All right, so let's break this down. Nima, talk to me about it. That question about Peterson's attorneys. The prosecution argues he can't retain his attorneys because this is no longer a death penalty case, but his lawyers from the Habeas Corpus Resource Center say that they should stay on. What's likely to happen?
I think they likely will stay on. They've been working with him for so long. Obviously, you have special attorneys who handle death penalty appeals. It's a very sort of niche area of the law. But ultimately, this is someone or team that's been working on Peterson's case for years. Doesn't make sense to replace them, have someone start over and start relitigating and relearning all these issues. I expect the team to stay on.
Terry, you know, Peterson spent the last 15 years in prison at San Quentin. Do you think that the judge correctly denied his bail? Is he really that much of a flight risk or danger?
Well, I think the judge is probably looking at the seriousness of this crime. He not only was convicted of killing his wife, but his unborn child as well. So I think that's part of the rationale behind the judge's decision. I don't think there is a potential for a flight risk, but if you think about it, he very well might be thinking about how can I just disappear? So that possibility does exist, although it's a slight possibility. But I think the judge is probably just thinking logically. If the sentencing is going to be life in prison and that's going to happen in December, then the judge might be thinking, well, why let him out now? In a couple of months, we're going to sentence him to life. he may as well just sit in jail while he waits for that sentencing.
Well, it's going to be a pretty similar environment to what he's seen in the last 15 years. But having said that, who knows what's going to happen with Scott Peterson? Never thought we were going to say his name again. Nima Rahmani, Terry Austin, thank you so much. And everyone out there, thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.